One more. Here we go. Hi, I'm Amy from Alaska.
And I'm Bobetta from Oklahoma.
But we're probably going to die.
Here in California.
I sure hope so.
Welcome to our podcast, Beside Death Life, where we'll be discussing dealing with death, but from the vantage point of living.
With a dash of humor, because why not?
I mean, why not?
Why not?
Why not? All right, here we are, guys. Welcome to our podcast, Beside Death Life. Here with my co-host, Amy Jones, and our guest today. Super excited to have Dr. Stuart Fishbein, MD. He has been a longtime friend of mine. What are we going on, like 11, 12 years now, maybe?
It was from that screening down in Orange County or somewhere, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That we met?
Yeah, it is actually. And I live there now.
What film did we watch? What film did we see?
Was
it Business of Being Born? Maybe?
It could have been. You were on the speaker panel. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's what it was. Yeah.
And I was like,
we've been good friends ever since. Thanks. Yeah. I appreciate you having me on. It's nice to talk to an audience that probably never heard of me before.
Yeah, I think, well, they're going to know about you now, and we'll get into why I'm bringing you into this realm in just a moment. I want to kind of catch up with you. Like, what have you been up to? What's going on in Dr. Stu land?
Well, as you know, I'm retired from clinical practice. So I moved out of Los Angeles. I live in southern Utah, small little town close to Zion National Park, which is just lovely here. And I continue to advocate for informed decision-making for breech and twin sanity. And by going around the world and teaching a 2-day seminar on breech and twin skills, among many other things, including why we are in the mess we're in, where modern obstetrics has taken us. It's not necessarily a good ending. And about informed consent and coercion and all those things that we talk about. So that's a 2-day seminar that I do. I do a lot of advocacy online. I probably have 1 or 2 or 3 Zoom meetings a day with people all over the world who have questions about what they're doing. I'm working on some projects, which will be, I don't want to speak about yet, but they're book projects. And then I've had some papers published, that sort of thing. And then I have my own podcast. And we do that weekly, called the Birthing Instincts Podcast with my co-host Bliss Young. And then I go around and I speak on other subjects too. Like I'll go to a conference this year, the Reclaiming Birth Conference in Ontario, Canada, and the Twin Breech Conference in Austin, Texas, where I speak about other topics, not necessarily teaching my seminar. And then I love living my life now at this point in my life where I'm, home a lot and I grow vegetables and get out into nature and go for bike rides and hikes. And so that's it. I've sort of earned this place in my career now where I don't have to be up in the middle of the night. It does wear on you. For any birth worker who's listening, you know what I'm talking about. You may not get called every night, but you never go to bed at night not knowing if you're going to be called. And it does something with, I don't know what part of your brain that is, the amygdala or something that you're constantly on high intensity. So it's nice. It's really nice.
I've been to I love it. I've been to your spot out there and visited you a couple of years ago, I think. We took this amazing drive. Amy, if you've never done it, Stu, you'd have to remind me what highway it is, but it's like going east toward, what's that giant lake?
Lake Powell.
Lake Powell. Wow, it was an incredible drive, and it's just rocks. But if you like rocks,
yeah. Well, and you have a marvelous dog, so that was all. It was fun to have your dog come and visit. And
she does have a marvelous
I love
dog.
that people pass through this part of it. It's a very touristy area, so it's not surprising that people pass through because we are like a hub on the eastern side towards Zion and Bryce and Grand Canyon and Lake Powell, kind of all 4 different directions, and it's sweet. So that's what I've been doing. I don't want to spend too much more time on that. But if anybody listening is planning a trip through Kanab, Utah, please consider reaching out and saying hello.
Oh, okay, I will. Hey, so how is Lake Powell doing though? Just out of curiosity, how is
Horribly.
Lake Powell? Okay.
Horribly. Yeah, we have a real water shortage right now in southern Utah. And, I'm not really involved or up to date on all this hullabaloo going on in northern Utah about this data center just north of Salt Lake City, but there's a lot of environmentalists and people that are really concerned about where the power is going to come from, where are the people going to live, and where's the water going to come from that's going to be needed to cool the system. I don't know too much, but it's right now we could really use some thunderstorms. We have a monsoon season usually in July and August, and I'm hoping we get a lot of rain this year because we really could use it. Because Lake Powell is pathetically low. I think it's historical right now.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a sad situation. It's a very sad situation. We lived in Utah. My dad worked for the BLM out there, so I'm kind of familiar with it a little bit. But this is not as interesting as doula stuff. So
To some people, it's probably more interesting.
Actually, it is. It's very interesting to me. I could talk all about it, but I don't want it to be about me because
it is about. Speaking of your podcast, which is called Birthing Instincts, found wherever you find podcasts, and you guys have been doing this for a long time. You're in the past the mid 400s. And I want to share with our audience that you actually recently spoke to some guests of your own. I believe it's number 451, talking with two other birth workers about insurance, oversight, and regulation. And that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about, Dr. Stu, because it's very interesting what is going on. I'm new to the death world. I am like I was a baby birth doula. I took I believe it's INELDA training, and I was very excited. I remember this coming into birth world, and I was like, I'm going to make these changes. Like, I'm going to bring all this ooey gooey wonderfulness to, a person in their transitional time of need. Then it was birth, now it's death. And as I sit in this online space with death workers who have been doing this for a long time, like now I'm a birth worker who's done something for a long time, and they are a bit incensed about this influx and attention for death doula as a new job. We're seeing celebrities, right? Like Nicole Kidman, etc. It's on TV shows, The Pit. There's a lot of attention to it. And so with attention brings regulating bodies, that want to get in on it as a business, right? So this is something you spoke to there. I kind of just want to be a megaphone to the death community to be aware of, in the name of accessibility, we all want people to be able to have access to doula care, birth, postpartum death, but with that comes oversight and regulations. And what that looks like, I feel like, Stu, you have really great insight on from your end.
What you just said actually sums it up pretty well.
That's it. We're done.
Well, no, it does. Well, when people seek out adulation by any means, whether it's by regulation and licensing or anything like that, where they lead you with the enticement of recognition and maybe even better reimbursement because you get better paid if you're regulated or licensed. People fall for that. And what happens is it's a variation of, I think, what Ben Franklin said, and I'm going to butcher the quote, but those that would give up freedom for a bit of safety or security deserve neither, or will end up with neither. And this is what will happen here as well. Because once you are under the thumb of a regulator or insurance, then they can decide what to do with you, because you are now financially dependent upon them. And if they suddenly change the rules on you and decide they're going to pay you 20% less than they paid you last year, what are you going to do? Suddenly stop taking insurance? And then they've already convinced all the women who are pregnant or the people in the death field that insurance doulas are the best doulas, and you have to be licensed because licensing makes you better, even though there's no evidence of that. It's just propaganda. And so now you're at their mercy. And then they come in with a new regulation that says, you can't do this or you have to do this. And then if you don't do this, you can lose your license, or worse, be accused of something, civil or criminal. For what? And then they also it becomes algorithmic. I've watched what they've done to midwifery, where the medical organizations either overtly or clandestinely have taken over midwifery training, midwifery licensing, even the word midwifery. In some countries and in some states, you cannot use the word midwife unless you are licensed. What gives the government the right to to abscond with a word that's been around, for thousands of years. And they do it anyway, because they always use safety as a canard to convince you that, or to get you to do what you want. And we've seen this over and over again. The propaganda will say we're doing this for safety, but they actually look at the outcomes and it's less safe. And that doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is control and money, like any other business or profession. Right. That's the bottom line. Healthcare is kind of an no, it's not, what do you call it? An oxymoron, because it really isn't about health and it really isn't about caring. It's about controlling your health and pretending to care. Because no one can care for you as much as somebody who's directly in your line of sight. Somebody sitting in an office in Sacramento or Washington, D.C. does not care about you, yet they will begin to regulate you and tell you what to do. So don't be easily enticed by the idea of recognition by some body and getting something you can nail on your wall. I used to, when I had in old days when I was very medicalized and I had an office, I had a whole wall covered with my achievements. Now, for the last 15 to 20 years, they've been sitting in a plastic container from the Container Store in a closet, which is where they belong, because they don't mean anything. Getting that degree is important. Getting your training is important. But once you are trained, the idea that having a license or being regulated is going to keep you a better doula or a better midwife or a better OB is false. It doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll bring receipts. How do I know that? Two reasons. One, I used to be a fellow of the American College. Now I'm just an associate. And the reason I'm an associate is because I'm no longer board certified, right? Now, the day that my board certification expired, did I become a less qualified physician? And the answer is no, of course not. Right? Did I keep up my education? Yeah, I expanded my education because I wasn't being forced to take the education that the board wanted me to take. I could take something on wilderness medicine if I wanted to. That count goes for my CMEs, my continuing education units, without having to take what the board sent me, something about, alternative chemotherapy for stage 2 breast cancer and blah, blah, blah. Something that I have no interest in, but I would have to be reading those articles and answering questions about those articles. So it didn't serve any purpose. Plus, the other thing about being board certified and being a fellow of the American College is that, maybe we'll get into it, maybe that's not today's topic, but every dumb thing in the last 50 years that has been done by obstetricians in women's medicine has been done by board certified fellows of the American College of OBGYN. So just because you have these titles behind your name does not mean that you are wise. Yet there's a group of people who think that if you're college educated, you're better than if you're not college educated. And if you are, an OB, you're better than a midwife. And if you are maternal fetal medicine, then you're at the cream of the crop. And, you can't argue with somebody because they have more credentials than you do. Well, that's not how it works. I'm sorry. When you're saying stupid stuff, you can argue all you want.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many things that you said that I could speak to, but we'll go piece by piece here. Recently, I have moved to Orange County. I was in Los Angeles forever. And I thought, maybe I'll go teach some breastfeeding education and childbirth education. I met a nurse who said, "Oh, we could use you over here." Now it's Kaiser. And she said, you'll have to follow the Kaiser protocol, what have you. And I said, well, whatever, I'll reach out. I'll see what's going on. So they're like, well, we're going to need your certifications. And just so you know, so everybody knows, even though I went through all of this training, I refused to ever certify with any DONA or ICEA or any of these people, for the exact purpose of being able to run my practice the way that I wanted to run my practice and not be relegated to whatever this certifying body wanted me to do. So anyway, so I reach out to ICEA and I'm like, hey, I took your training 10 years ago. These people want a certification. Can't you send it to me? And they're like, no, you have to take the training again and you'll need to go to 3 live births and have all these people sign off of it. And I'm like, guys, this is not, what are you talking about? I've been doing this for almost 20 years, but it doesn't matter. when
No,
you're dealing
it
with?
doesn't matter. An example from myself is that I've been asked many times, do I want to come back and maybe do some shifts in a hospital? I get approached by headhunters daily almost in my email. We have a job opening in Sacramento or a job opening in Cleveland or whatever. Great. And by the way, salaries look good. The benefits look good. It does look like a good thing. But
I don't know.
I wouldn't be.
Cleveland sounds really nice right now. I don't know. Wow.
Well,
Okay, but
somehow Cleveland is always my example of when I always bring up Cleveland. But my point is that even if I wanted to go back and help out in a hospital, I wouldn't be allowed to. Why?
right.
Because I don't have malpractice insurance. And now maybe they would cover that. Plus, I'm not board certified. Right. So in their eyes, like in your eyes, if you don't have that certification paper, you're not qualified. Now, what's really sneaky and dastardly about it is that the certification agencies will approach hospitals. They approach insurance companies and they say, you should not let somebody on staff who isn't board certified by our organization, or you should not reimburse people or put them on your insurance panels unless they're certified by our organization. And in that way, they've got it coming and going because doctors who think it's unnecessary to have these certifications have to have them anyway, and they're not cheap.
Nope.
Especially for doctors. The ongoing fees every year are ridiculous. It used to be you were board certified once in your life and you were always called board certified. Kind of like when a lawyer passes the bar. When a lawyer passes the bar, they don't call them a bar certified lawyer, but they are basically an esquire. They're a lawyer. They don't have to take the bar every 10 years and then every 6 years and then now yearly. What happens is doctors now, they need to do maintenance of board certification every year. And so, and you pay for that. And it's over $1,000 a year. You're paying to take modules that you aren't interested in, but you have to do it anyway in order to keep that board certification that 30, 40 years ago was once and you're done and you're for life. But they just got greedy and they think that they're the safe, they're the guardians of safety. It's a very egocentric position to be in but it's also blind because if they're the guardians of safety, then how come they're not doing things that are safe?
Which is what your whole podcast is about.
Well, my whole shtick is about that.
And that's what you're just saying is that once you just you're so safe that we've lost all freedom, basically, in a sense. That's what you were saying with what Ben Franklin's quote was.
You end up because you're not safe either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our outcomes, in our hospital-based birthing around the world, America's doing better than a lot of other countries, but around the world it's consistently gotten more invasive, more interventions, more technology, more medications, whether it's antibiotics or Pitocin or Cytotec or whatever, more monitoring, more scanning, and yet our outcomes have not improved. Now, some people say, well, but we fix. Yes, they've done miracles with certain things. But when you're say you scan every single woman 5 times during her pregnancy, maybe you'll pick up one baby that might have had a terrible problem. But what are you doing to all the thousands of other ones who didn't need the ultrasounds? Well, you're exposing them to radiation that we don't really have any testing on that says it's safe. 2, you may find a little thing that starts to make the woman or the doctor nervous. Now the entire pregnancy, they're worried about stuff. And then you create fake labels like, oh, you're over 35, or your baby's on the smaller side, or your baby's too big. It's kind of the Goldilocks theory. It's never just right. It's either something's always wrong. And you start to women funnel them down the path toward that famous cascade of interventions, which then leads for a C-section rate rising from 5% 50 years ago plus to a C-section rate in the United States now of 35%, close. And in some countries, in countries I talk to on a regular basis, you're seeing C-section rates of 70 and 80%, especially in the private sector. In South Africa, for instance, 80% C-section rate in private hospitals, much lower in the public hospitals. So what is it? Is there a difference between the pelvises of private patients and non-private patients? I don't think so. All right. But yet these are the people that want to then now go and regulate the doulas and the midwives, keep their control of the doctors. I'm sorry, Amy, go ahead.
In the death doula like, since we're kind of at the very beginnings of, like, they're starting to try to poke their noses in to start to regulate. Is there, I mean, what would our path to try to educate people to prevent this? Or, and then also, I mean, not that you would know, but who decides? Who's the one that says, I mean, is there a group that gets together and, goes to
Yep.
the insurance company?
Yeah, they'll form a group,
And
and
who's the
then they
group?
will.
Who's the group that, do you know who?
NADA,
Is this
National
what's
End of
happening?
Life.
Is this what's
Hmm.
happening?
Yeah, they're
NADA.
doing the same thing. NADA. Yeah.
Okay.
Couple
Right.
things. First of all, I want to give an example. It's a little. It's there when laparoscopic surgery first became a thing. So we're talking the 1980s, late 80s. Before that, when you had an ovarian cyst or an ectopic pregnancy, they did an open laparotomy. And then they began doing laparoscopic surgery, and they've advanced it really well. And it's actually brilliant because the risks are less, the recovery is faster. It's a good surgery. But what happened then? An organization formed out of Arizona called the American Association of Gynecologic Laparoscopists, and they would then lobby on behalf of people who did laparoscopy, except they didn't represent the average physician. They represented big business and academia. And one of the things they did was insurance companies stopped paying for an assistant at laparoscopic surgery. Sometimes you need an extra pair of hands because you have more than 2 ports, you have 3 ports or whatever, and you need another pair of hands. Well, they stopped paying for that. And I wrote a letter to the American Association of Gynecologic Laparoscopists thinking that they were going to be upset by that and they would advocate on our behalf. And I got a letter back from them basically saying, when we have surgery like that, we just help each other out, and they do it for free. But here's the hitch. These are all paid academicians. They're on salary at universities or at teaching hospitals. So they're getting paid the same whether they do surgery or don't do surgery. So if they go in and help somebody, that's just part of their day's work and their salary. Whereas private doctors had to leave their office behind and go stand there, and they wanted us to do it for free. So they didn't really help us at all. They became an organization that became obsessed with their own power. And another example of that, so this is things that can be extrapolated into what will happen to doulas and midwives, is the insurance industry. There was a malpractice crisis in California also in the 80s. And so what the response to that was for doctors to get together and form their own insurance companies. And there was some legislation that passed in California to help keep pain and suffering limited to $250,000. So it kept our premiums reasonable if you can count $40,000 to $50,000 a year reasonable. But it was a lot cheaper than places like New York and Florida, which had real crises. So these doctors formed their own insurance company. And one of them was called the Southern California Physicians Insurance Exchange, or SCIPI for short. And for initially, you could join them, and it was a lot cheaper than traditional malpractice insurance. But within 5 to 10 years, the doctors that got together to organize this, they quit practicing medicine, and they became full-time insurance executives. And they built a really nice building, and they paid themselves really nice salaries, and the premiums that we paid gradually crept up to the same as the old insurance companies were. So they became what they once detested because of the power that comes with controlling things.
Fuck
And it is
those
a certain type
guys.
of person. I'm sorry, Amy?
I said, fuck those guys.
Yeah, it's a certain type of person that likes to administrate. The old saying that those that can teach, those that can't teach. No,
Those that can't do, teach.
Those that can do, those that can't do, teach, and those that can't teach, administrate. And so the least qualified people tend to be the ones we put in charge of the qualified people. I remember this story, my mom coming home and being very upset about the whole thing. They had money in the fund to build on buildings, but they couldn't take some of that money and pay the music teacher. And this is kind of those kind of lessons in life begin to shape you, and you begin to understand that it isn't about quality, it isn't about health care, it isn't about your kids in school. It's about budgets and spending money, and that's in the building budget. We can't use that for the salary budget, and that's not how you'd run your household. If you have a food budget every month and you have a toilet that's leaking all over the bathroom floor, you don't say, I can't fix the toilet because I can't take money from the food budget. You don't do that. But that's how it works. And if you don't spend the money, the next year you get less money. So they find reasons to spend money and build things and do things that are unnecessary, because that's how bureaucrats work. That is not how the individual midwife or doula work. We care about the individual. And what happens when midwives or doulas become dependent on a third party, whether it's for licensing or employment, you have now compromised their fiduciary duty. Because as you were using the Kaiser example, if you work at Kaiser, Kaiser doesn't let women go past 41 weeks.
No.
Now, an obstetrician or a midwife who works for Kaiser knows that this woman's doing fine, the baby's fine. There's no reason you have to do anything before 41 weeks. But now, if they let them go past 41 weeks, they're going to get yelled at by their employer, possibly lose their bonus, possibly lose their job. So what are they going to do? They're going to find ways to use language to coerce women into believing that going past 41 weeks is dangerous. And this is what happens over and over again. And they do a great job of coercing women because fear is the greatest motivator. And once you make somebody nervous, you have them. You're able to manipulate them. That's why education, well before women fall into this system, is so important. Because if they're well educated, when a doctor starts to do this kind of thing, they can look at the doctor and they can go, Dr. Smith, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that's accurate. Can you show me the data on what you're doing? And challenge them politely. Doctors should like being challenged, but they hate it.
Yeah.
Part of the reason they hate it is because they don't know anything. And part of the reason they hate it is because they really don't have they're frustrated because they don't have the time to actually spend the time talking to the woman because their schedule is set by their employer. And the same thing will happen to midwives who work in a system. Midwives generally have an hour-long prenatal visit, but midwives that work at Kaiser, I don't think they get an hour. Maybe they get a half an hour. So they get, and maybe even less, because they're in a corporate system now where it's about money and hopefully preventing liability. It's not about outcomes.
No,
outcomes can be worse, but if you follow the protocol, then you're probably safe from liability. And by the way, if you follow the protocol, you probably generated more revenue because the protocol includes more testing. And the more testing you do, the more money the institution makes. Even in socialized countries, they're just billing the government instead of an insurance company. So when a hospital in England or Australia does more ultrasounds and more color flow Dopplers and admits more babies to the NICU, they make more money.
More money. Yeah.
Right.
And so there's one
last thing. So what's their incentive to not do those things? This is basic economics, guys. This is economics 101. You want more of something, you subsidize it. You want less of something, you tax it. Well, if we're subsidizing doing more stuff, guess what's going to happen? We're going to do more stuff.
Yeah.
It's not hard.
So interesting. I want to kind of parallel this with the popularity of birth doula rose at a slower pace, maybe even along the lines of just where we were in our technological, advancement. And now here we are in this spiral where everything is happening very quickly. So the attention to death doulas is like this, and the insurance companies are right behind it and the regulating body. So that educational aspect where birth doulas had a lot of years actually to come in and start educating people about the biophysiology, right, of birth. There is a biophysiology. The body also knows how to die. And that is something that our people in the world, we don't know anything about. Death has always been very taboo as a subject, shrouded. It's like, we don't want to look at that, and medicalized, right? In America. So we're having this insurgence of the death literacy or education at the same time that regulating bodies are trying to come in. And I'm curious as to, because with death, unlike birth, though there is an outcome, there isn't a live person later. There isn't a baby or a mommy later. The end of the story is the end of the story, right? I mean, you may have the finances and the drama of the family and everything to deal with later, but that person is no longer here. So I'm curious.
Physically, that's correct.
Physically. There's a lot that, we live in a society currently that it's all about living at all costs, right? In the medical idea of we're going to do all these things. Oh, yeah, no, not in Canada. Which I want to get to that too, because
these are outside my expertise. I can just talk as a normal citizen, but
should.
Yeah. But I hear you. People will struggle to stay alive. They'll do everything they can to stay alive. They'll try any sort of remedy that's pushed on them by anybody, and including the medical profession. which is probably no different
yeah.
than snake oil salesman and or Laetrile for cancer in Mexico clinics back when I was young. That I think it comes from almonds or something, and they charge people a ton of money to go down there, and they still do it. There's all kinds of these, even now GLP-1s or stem cell injections or whatever. Maybe they'll work. Maybe red light therapy will work. Maybe it won't work. Who knows? But it depends. Some of these things are not very costly, like red light therapy. It's worth a try. But other things are extremely costly, and I don't know that there's a lot of data behind them. And then even if there is data behind them, how well can you trust the data? Because we live in a world where research is totally compromised. Even good research, sometimes can't get published because the journals won't publish it. And bad research will get published because it supports the narrative. So it is a bit of a mess. You said something really interesting to me just a minute ago. You said that death is shrouded, taboo, and medicalized. Right. And I'm thinking, well, you're describing birth.
I know. That's why I wanted you here.
Because when you make something shrouded, taboo, scary, medicalized, you can control it much better. Listen, if 80% of the women who are having babies, I'll go back to babies because that's my thing.
That's your,
or even death. If they decided to die at home or give birth at home, some industries would lose a fortune. All right, and they don't want that to happen. There was a documentary. It's a documentary about grandma dying at home, and the family's around, the grandchildren are around. They come in and out of the room. They're talking to grandma. She's on hospice care. Oh, it's called A Family Undertaking.
Family Undertaking. All right, I'll put it in the notes. Yeah, and watch it.
You can find it. It's A Family Undertaking. It's not very long. But it does for death what doulas do for life, and it demystifies it. We now have a society where most people live their entire life never seeing a baby being born, never seeing a person actually expire. That 50, 100 years ago, that was never the case. People were born at home, they died at home.
And it was passed on generation after generation of how to interact and know kind of what to expect.
Yeah, it was a normal part of existence. Now we've mystified it.
Yeah.
And it's on purpose, because if people are being born at home and dying at home, as I said a minute ago, there's a lot of money being lost to some businesses. So the more they mystify it, the more they shroud it, the words you use, taboo, the more they make it like this is something that has to be done in a medical facility, but it doesn't. And that's where hospice care has been a good thing, I think, where they come to your home, they let you die. Again, not my expertise, but just for me, it just seems like if I was going to die, I'd want to die looking at the mountains in my backyard.
Right.
Not a fluorescent light, with loudspeakers going off in the hallway and some stranger coming in at night and turning me from side to side, while she's talking to her girlfriend about the day that they had, last week at the rave they went to or whatever. And there's no concern for the individual. There's no warmth. There's no continuity. Again, you care more about people in your direct line of sight. No one cares more for you than your own family members. You care more about them than you do your neighbor. And you care more about your neighbor than you do somebody living in a town, 20 miles away. And you certainly care more about somebody who's an American maybe than somebody who's living in Central Africa, right? That's just normal. But Central Africans care more about Central Africans than they care about Americans. It's how we're built. The idea that we're going to industrialize it all and make it so that we have rules and regulations that tell you this is how we're going to deal with death or this is how we're going to deal with life, that may not fly for most people because we need to individualize our care. Some people want to be knowing what's going on. Other people don't want to know what's going on. Some people want to be touched. Other people don't want to be touched. You have rules. I know that my friend Nathan Riley eventually got fired from his job in palliative care because he went in and held the hand of somebody and it was deemed inappropriate. And I can't think of anything that could have been more appropriate. But yet, people that run these things they're worried about, oh my God, you'll be accused of this or accused of that. It's like you're dehumanizing all of us. And that's where doulas fall into the trap of wanting to be recognized. So they're going to give up their freedom for the recognition of being licensed or being regulated or whatever. I personally think that we need to learn from history, and it's a big mistake. It's never worked
I
out well for
agree.
anybody. It hasn't worked out well for doctors.
Yeah,
Doctors are
absolutely.
held over their head. One bad outcome, whether there's negligence or not, can end a career simply because the medical board comes and investigates you, and they decide that they don't have their quota met for this month on doctors they've disciplined. So they're going to really pick on you, and they're going to make a big deal about it. And then it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to defend yourself. It's embarrassing because that's on your record forever. Even if you're sometime later things are exonerated, it doesn't really matter. Because if you Google somebody, it comes up that they were disciplined by the medical board, not that the medical board is a bunch of asshole people who paid no attention to that person whatsoever. Okay, and just did something that was wrong, but they're never punished for doing something was wrong. The punishment is, it's like that same guy that once said, when he was falsely accused of something, he says, "Where do I go to get my reputation back?"
Yeah,
you can't.
Yeah.
Well, it's the proverbial "have you beat your wife lately" question. No, I mean, you're topic, but it is. If you accuse somebody of doing something, that's probably just as bad. It doesn't matter whether they did it or not. You've put it out there.
Yeah,
I still remember
absolutely.
Harry Reid, the senator from Nevada, said something. He made a false claim about Mitt Romney and charities or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. And when he was called upon it after the election, when Mitt Romney lost, they said, "But you lied about it." And he said, "Yeah, but it worked, didn't it?"
And so how do we get out in front? Is there any, what should we kind of try to be doing to get out in front of regulating? Is there a way to put a stick in the spokes here?
There is, but it requires energy and advocacy that often we don't have the expertise or time for because we're busy doing our job. How does a busy doula or a busy midwife or a busy OB, maybe they have 3 or 4 kids at home. How do you suddenly go off to your state capital and start lobbying? And why would they even listen to you? Because they're bought off by the people with the money. Who's got the money? The big organizations have the money. You can't out lobby ACOG or ACNM. You're not going to be able to do it. So I don't want to leave you guys with a doom and gloom message, but it's very difficult. You just have to resist it. You just have to say to yourself, for your own integrity, I'm going to keep my integrity and maybe make less money, or have to find another career, or I'm going to sell my integrity and continue to do this job, which I'm going to end up hating because I can't do it the way that I was trained or the way that I feel in my heart that the job needs to be done. So you have to resist them. There are other things that we can do. We can, agree not to take insurance. And the problem is that when you get a group of people together, there's always going to be those that undermine the other part of the group. So it happens with midwives all the time. Midwives want to resist this, but a group of midwives will come out and say, "No, we want to be regulated." And then they pit midwife against midwife, and the people sitting in the back who want to regulate you just sit there and laugh because they just sit back and let that you eat each other up. Same thing happens in pretty much every profession.
I think this is part of it is just talking about it too. Getting out in front of it is letting the doulas know that this is down the road. And the whole idea, like you said, we don't want to pit each other. We don't want to pit it. But I mean, if you went to the state capitol to try, so do you go, I mean, would it be is there a health human services committee that is the one that starts?
What you do in that case is you hire a facilitator. You don't know how it works there, but there are people that know how it works there. It's kind of like if you're trying to do a construction project at home. You can try to file the permits yourself. Good luck.
Yeah.
Or you can probably is like the brother-in-law of the controller who runs the permit department, and you pay them a few $100s and they get your thing to the top of the pile.
Got it.
So that's how the world works. Again, it's all about money. So you're going to have to raise money. You're going to have to spend money to hire somebody to help you figure out how to lobby, how to get you appointments with your state representatives and that sort of thing. And and even if they'll listen to you. I went to Washington once to lobby against the Affordable Care Act, and it was sponsored by the Heritage Foundation, which was a conservative organization, but it didn't matter because they were very nice to us. And we went there with our scrubs and white coats. And I was going to see my congressperson and then Senator Feinstein, who was my senator at the time. And I wanted to tell you that Washington is not run by senators and congresspeople. Washington is run by 24-year-old interns who you get to meet with. You don't get to meet with Senator Feinstein. You get to meet with her 24-year-old intern, who then comes to the meeting 20 minutes late, starts looking at her watch while you're trying to talk, tell you she's not interested in what you have to say. All right. She's just honoring you because you're a constituent. So she comes to the meeting, but she was late, and she would, and there's no way that I know whether or not she took what I said back to Senator Feinstein. Likely, you could tell by her body language that she did not. And this is how it works. How it would work better is if I gave Senator Feinstein a $10,000 campaign donation, then I might be able to have dinner with Senator Feinstein. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I could talk to her directly. Will that change anything? No, because the people on the other side gave her a $100,000 campaign donation. So this is how it works. So it's going to come from the women and the families. In your case, the families are going to decide that they are not going to deal with this sort of thing, and the doulas are going to decide not to partake in it. And we'll have to see whether or not that grows. I do believe there's a counterculture growing. I think that medicine has overstepped its bounds. It's done poorly. You could see that they're constantly lying and gaslighting. We saw it extremely well with, COVID shone a light on the cockroaches. And instead of scattering, they just regrouped. My organization is still recommending COVID vaccine to pregnant women in 2026.
I think this is so bad.
I can't even think of something that could be more stupid, and they're all in on doing it. So we need other reforms that have to go along with this. We need legal reforms. We need insurance reforms. We need to again, going to basic economics, we need to pay for things more that we want. Like in my profession, if you want more vaginal deliveries and less C-sections, then pay more money for a vaginal delivery and less for a cesarean. But if you're paying more for cesarean delivery, what's the incentive of the chief financial officer of any hospital to come to a meeting and say, hey guys, let's all lower our C-section rate? And they'll all look at him like going, are you crazy? If we lower our C-section rate, we'll make less revenue. No, let's make it more enticing to lower their C-section rate by paying them more money for vaginal births. One of the things I said is, like, if a hospital has a C-section rate less than 20%, pay them more money pay them more money per birth that they do. If it's over 30%, pay them less money. And if it's over 40%, pay them even less money. And you'll use coercion for a good reason. Coercion is going to be used no matter what. We might as well start using it for ourselves and say, let's coerce a hospital into lowering its C-section rate and supporting breech delivery and twin vaginal delivery and that sort of thing. And it's the same thing for doulas. Hospitals want to think they're doing good by hiring a doula to then help a woman who doesn't have a doula. Well, who's that doula working for?
Yeah, exactly.
She's working for the hospital. So is she going to advise the woman against the policy of the hospital? No, of course not. She's not going to do that because she'll get fired. So she's compromised. So if people need to understand, and people who are hiring these people need to understand that. You hire somebody that works for the hospital, or you get it for free, which is even worse, because if you get something for free, it has no value to you. So the hospital providing you a doula and you're not paying for it, that doula has very little value to you. You value things that you pay for. And I'm sorry?
I want to speak to that really quick before I forget.
Oh, go ahead. I'm just rambling.
While I was living in Big Bear, which is where I met Amy, where she lives, it was post-COVID, and I was on the mountain. They do not have an OBGYN. You came to visit me there. They don't have a midwife that works on the mountain. And I was going to hospital board meetings because they fly women out at like 5 and 5. If you're past 5 centimeters and 5 minutes contractions, because they don't have any help there. So I approached them saying, hey, I could be a doula that works, helps you with your women that are here. And I was trying to do a bunch of other stuff. And anyway, they said, well, we can't pay you unless you're we work with Medi-Cal or whatever it is. So I went through and I got my NPI and everything under the idea that I would be helping, provide a service that didn't exist. Well, it ends up not working out. They allocate their funds to drug abuse and elders on the mountain. Like the population for birthing people on the mountain isn't big enough for them to spend money on. So I go, okay, whatever. Bye. See you later. Well, this NPI, I'm listed online under Medi-Cal. So I get all of these calls, people wanting to use Medi-Cal insurance for me as a birth doula, and I've refused. I've never taken it. I did have one young lady who I moved out of hospitals to home birth like the last 5 years of my birth doula practice because of everything, but I've always been cash. Anyway, this young lady comes to do a second birth with me, and she's like, well, now I have Medi-Cal. Do you think? And I said, just tell me what you need from me, and I give her whatever she asked for. And it was this whole rigmarole because she'd already paid me out of pocket that she ends up not getting reimbursed for, etc. But what I want to bring you back to is what you just said. That was the backstory about value. As I just recently had like 6 people reach out to me. I got to get off this list. And one of them calls me instead of an email, and and it's this husband. I get hired by a lot of husbands, but this one was just like, yeah, we want you. Medi-Cal covers it. We want everything. And I'm like trying to understand what his wife is looking for in her birth, idea. And it was all about what they were getting for free. That tick box of what they're getting for free. Anyway, I was like, sorry, unless you can pay for me, I'm not for you. This is not the relationship I'm going to have with someone. You're going to get an epidural, and they refused to take childbirth education classes. They didn't know anything, and they didn't care.
They just wanted you there because you were going to be free. Yeah. Yeah. They had no interest in like the backstory of like what all the hell's going to go on. They just wanted you to float in. Yeah.
On that same vein, when you're talking, practitioner independence is what keeps quality.
Yes.
Quality always fails when you get centralization of control. Whether that's a big corp or big government, it doesn't matter. Because when doctors and midwives and doulas are working shifts, they have less connection to the person. There's no continuity of care. Job satisfaction's even less.
Yeah.
Imagine being a doula for somebody all night long, and she's starting to push, and it's 7:00 in the morning. You have to leave.
Gotta go.
Right. So you don't get to see the culmination of your work. Do you imagine what that does to the mind of the woman who's pushing? Because now a stranger walks in she's never met before, and whether it's a doula or a midwife or the OB, they come in. They have no connection to her. She's just somebody to get the baby out, get the baby in the bassinet, and then move on to the next task. It sounds cold and callous, and that's exactly what it is. Doesn't mean the individual doctor or midwife or doula is cold and callous. It's the system that makes them cold and callous because they don't get very good satisfaction from what they're doing, and there's too many conflicts of interest in what they're doing. How do I know that? Again, bringing receipts. If you're a happy person, do you use coercion? Do you roll your eyes when somebody says something you don't agree with? Do you bully somebody? Do you huff out of the room because you don't like what they've said? No, happy people don't do that. Unhappy people do that. So when you are treated that way in a hospital, they say we want to start Pitocin on you, and you say I'm not ready for that yet, and then they use things. Well, your baby, if we don't do it now, your baby could get infected, and your baby could be injured seriously, and even though the chance of that happening is so remote, that's what they choose to bring to the forefront. Again, happy people don't do that. So why are all these people working in a hospital unhappy? And we've already discussed it for the last hour. It's obvious why they're unhappy. They don't have the individual freedom to do the things that they want to do and what they were trained to do. They go through all this training to come out and, again, be told how to practice by risk management lawyers and hospital administrators who set the regulations, or some OB committee that sets the regulations. But again, every woman is different, and not all practitioners have the same skills in their toolbox. Some are really good with personal relationships, others are not. Some are very skilled medically, others may not be so skilled medically. We should play to the strengths that we have, and we should be allowed to do that, to be human, but then they can't control you. And really what it all comes down to, and what the initial conversation was about doulas being regulated and that sort of thing, is about having control, Doesn't matter whether the outcomes are good or bad. Doesn't matter whether the people doing them are happy. Doesn't matter whether the women or the families receiving the care are happy. All it is about we control it. And if we control it, we control the money and we can potentially control the liability. Yeah, the fact that the whole thing of tort system hanging over everybody's head has not served people well. Yes, there are many malpractice cases. Almost none of them are from true negligence. Yes, there's plenty of negligence, and those cases need to be dealt with. But most malpractice cases are not negligent. They're bad outcomes that happen despite people doing the best they can. And I would say that people can do better if they were free to practice the way that they were trained to practice. Not so much the training they're getting now, but the training that like I got, where you can individualize your care, you have better outcomes. How do I know that? Bring receipts again. Look at any study that compares similar cohort of low-risk women birthing in the hospital versus birthing at home or a birth center, and you find like in every aspect of things, the women who do better who were born at home or born in a birth center than women who were born in the hospital, even if it's midwives in the hospital. The outcomes are still worse simply because you're in the hospital, and the hospital has policies and procedures that it has to follow. I mean, you don't, they're not laws or regulations, but they want you to follow them because they feel that it's protected. Let me give
Well,
you
and
another
most
thing.
people believe it, most people, just to speak to that, most people do have this idea in their head that it
Yeah,
is the law, that they can't walk out of the hospital or they can't fire their doctor and get
can't
a
just
new one.
decline. No, I'm not going to do that right now. I'm not going to sign that form
Yeah,
right now. They
yeah,
don't know that they can do that. Listen,
yeah.
I got in super trouble at Cedar Sinai once because I took midwife transfers, and a midwife transferred her patient to me, and she came to the hospital. I think we gave her an epidural. She got to completely dilated. She was pushing. She got off the bed. She was squatting on the floor, pushing, which was like, in general, the nurses didn't like that very much. I didn't like that very much because I wasn't used to it, but I was accepting of the fact that this is probably a better position than what I was, what I've been dealing with for the last 30 years. And so I looked at the midwife standing there and I said, "Do you want to catch the baby?" It's her client. They've got a relationship. I met her like 4 hours earlier, okay,
Right.
when I took her in transport. I said, "You want to catch the baby?" She said, "Sure." She catches the baby. I catch so much heat for letting somebody who's not credentialed by the institution to allow her to do a medical thing. Now, I didn't tell her to cut an episiotomy. I didn't ask her to stitch her up or do anything like that. But catching a baby was considered a medical thing. And I was told by the chief administrator of the hospital, if I ever do that again, I'm going to be kicked off staff. So I did what was best for the woman by having the person that she knows best catch the baby. I'm standing right next to her. Okay. Now it would have been okay if I let a first year medical student.
Right.
It would have been okay if I let the dad catch the baby. The dad isn't regulated by the hospital or certified by the hospital, right? That would have been okay. But letting a trained midwife who happens to be her midwife, but not credentialed because the hospital doesn't allow midwives to be credentialed, that's the problem. So what are they looking at? Are they looking at what's best for that client, or are they looking out for their own interests? And this is an example of it tells you that hospitals are not looking out for you. They're protecting
No.
their ass. This is what they do. And by doing so, if they can generate revenue for it, they'll do it. Which is why every woman who comes in labor and delivery gets an IV, gets their blood drawn, goes in the bathroom, pees in a cup. All those things are revenue generation for the hospital. Do you need to do them? No, of course not. You go to a home birth, we never do any of those things. We
Yeah.
don't draw blood or start an IV or make a woman pee in a cup when we come to a home birth. And yet somehow they still have babies.
Yeah, somehow. So to bring this parallel with death and medicalization, like I said, a lot of stuff is happening all at once: death literacy, insurance interest, oversight, regulations. But also at the same time is this grassroots idea of the beautiful dying at home, right? Which I find very interesting because if you look, you're at what, 1 to 2% for home births, Stu?
Yeah,
Like kind of
nationwide.
average
Yeah, in the
nationwide?
United States, nationwide, it's about 1.4%. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I'm so curious what the death doula community is thinking, like, is that going to be eaten up? I mean, if regulations and insurance come in, they're not going to say, hey, cool, let's do this at home, right? Or are they?
You'd wonder why insurance companies don't. I always wonder why insurance companies don't want to pay for home birth, and insurance companies should be a lot cheaper for a person to give birth at home or die at home for the insurance company.
Yeah.
Yet, for some reason, and maybe it's just, it's corporate collusion for all I know. Like, I don't know that for a fact, but it just seems like illogical that they want to make you go to a place where the insurance company is going to pay more money.
Right.
It's going to
Well,
cost the insurance company more money.
I think it kind of comes back to also like when you were talking about like if you're on your shift, your 12-hour shift, and the woman's about to have her baby, and then the new doula comes in because it's time to. I mean, it's kind of the same way with death. It's hard to be like, oh, here's your shift, and I know that the insurance right now they let you have like 1 hour a week or something when you're dying at home. And it's like 1 hour a week is not going to do
Yeah. It's like who's
there's
paying for the
hardly
rest of that?
anything, especially when people aren't educated on what's going on.
I know.
So, but I mean, yes, it would make sense. And that's why it's going to be scary if they start to regulate it, because then the doulas that are getting paid to be there that are doing it because they have a calling, or it's because they're
One of you asked the question. One of you asked the question earlier, is like, who decides? Who makes the rules? Who are these people that sit in a room and suddenly there's rules about what you can do and what you can't do? And back to the insurance argument, this is one of those things where I go back to my basic education way back when, and the economist Milton Friedman had this great video. He's obviously passed away, but he has this great video about the 4 ways you can spend money. And the way you're the most frugal is when you spend your own money on yourself, because you were responsible for it. And then it goes to spending your own money on someone else, and then spending someone else's money on someone else, and someone you know. And then the worst case is spending someone else's money on somebody you don't know because you don't care. Which is why a toilet seat costs $300 in the military. Okay. Because you're spending insurance companies are spending other people's money. So if they spend a lot of extra money that don't care about it, because all they do is they'll just raise premiums, they're always going to take their cut. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Trading Places, but there's a wonderful scene in the movie Trading Places where Eddie Murphy's sitting at a table and they're teaching him about the commodities, about pork bellies and gold and orange juice. And they look at him and they say, tell him the best part, Oliver, or whatever their names are. And he says, whether our clients make money or lose money, Duke and Duke makes the commission.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the same thing here. Why don't insurance companies pay for families to take care of their, maybe they're starting to do that, but why don't they pay for families to take care of their dying family at home? It's because they don't care.
Money. Yeah.
Right. It doesn't matter because, they have somehow they have a deal with the hospitals. I just have to believe they do. Between the big pharma, big hospital, and big insurance, they've got such a good monopoly on everything that why would anyone come in and sort of mess it up? So they fight to keep the status quo, even though the status quo isn't the best working system for those of us in it. Yeah. But that's what they do.
It is interesting at the same time, too, we are seeing new dispositions like terramation or, human composting and aquamation or hydrolysis pop up in different states along with MAID. I mean, this is a whole other episode, but it is interesting because there's a convergence trying to happen of more holistic or health care that is becoming legal. But I feel like it's like weed. When weed became available, like, holy shit, I can't even smoke it anymore. It's too strong and expensive. But yeah.
Oh, I didn't understand where you were going with that. Yeah, I can't speak to the mind child. That's not the right word. To the mind of the children who are coming up with the idea that we're going to let 20-year-olds with chronic pain die. We're going to help them do it. We have a death cult going on right now. The people in the world are insane, and part of the reason there's such insanity in the world may be very well what we've done to ourselves in the last 50 to 100 years as a society. Not just the poisonings, not just the radiation, but how we give birth. what we do, what's happening to the fetus
Huge.
developing in the womb. You know, I've thought about a lot about my mom lately. With the last Mother's Day was last month, and one of the things I never thought about until recently was that you know, my mom and we butted heads a lot, and I wish I could go back and do things differently, as a lot of probably of people listening think about they could have done things differently with their parent. But then I realized that, you know, my mother never witnessed my birth. My mother was put out with twilight sleep, and I was pulled out with forceps. And when she woke up, I wasn't there. I was in the nursery. So maybe we spent our whole lives trying to compensate for what doctors did to her in the name of good medicine. And maybe that's affected my mother's life. Maybe it's affected my life. Maybe then it's affected my children's life and the people that I encounter in ways that we can't quite grasp or understand. But it certainly makes the world more agitated. When we disturb nature's design, and women have no memory of the birth of their children, and fathers are not allowed in the room, so fathers are pushed aside as well. And we wonder why the family has been so disrupted. And I think that in some ways, medicine has played a huge role in that. You know, the idea of birth control pills, just giving out like candy.
No education on the female.
No real knowledge down the road of what it's doing to people. That you can just tell a woman, okay, you can go 20 years without having a period. Yeah, that's okay. Like, who said it was okay? Who studied that? Who decided it was okay? Well, Big Pharma thought, you know, there's billions of dollars to be made here. Let's do that. I know it's an interesting, we're getting off topic, but it's interesting because prior to the birth control pill, I've heard this from other people, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, but it makes sense to me. Medicines were given for a short period of time. You took antibiotics for a week. You took something like that. They didn't have antihypertensive medication. They didn't have that. So you know, the kind of medicines you took were for a short course of therapy. All right. Birth control pills, pharmaceutical companies got customers for life.
Yeah.
You're going to take this medicine for the rest of your life. And then they came up with SSRIs. And then that's because for whatever reason, medicine has gotten away from nature and nature's design. And when you get away from nature and nature's design, you better be damn sure that the intervention you're coming up with is safe and, to use a term, effective. And they don't look at it that way. They look at these things about profit. And they look at and about expediency and about litigation mitigation. So to bring this back to doulas, I would be very, very cautious if I was a doula, whether it's a birth doula or a death doula, of becoming part of a system that isn't serving women well, or in your case, families well. To just succumb to that for the recognition of being licensed, or the idea that you're going to be coerced into being licensed by being told that you cannot practice your trade, then change your title. This is what's done. Like my friend Billy Harrigan in Canada, you know, they can't use the word midwife in Canada unless they're licensed by the state. So the state has co-opted the word midwife. What gives a state the right to take over a word? I mean, is that something that governments can do now? That you can't call yourself a woman. You have to call yourself a person with a uterus. Because we decided that's the woman is preserved for only, for this group and not that group. No. The idea that we're going to take away the word midwife, so what Billy calls herself is a traditional birth attendant or traditional birth companion, attendant or companion. And you know, that's not something that's licensed. That's going back to tradition. Who were the women that helped women have birth? They were your neighbors. They were your grandmother. All right. It's, the idea that you need a license to help a woman do something that's a natural bodily function. Yes. Do you need a license to put forceps on, to do episiotomy? Probably not, but okay, you can argue that you want to have some level of training. Again, I get back to the example that all the dumb things and the bad outcomes are being done by people with high levels of training. So the idea that you're trained doesn't necessarily make you qualified. But doulas should resist this movement. If again, it's just from my life experience and my review of the history of medicine, I kind of get a kick out of looking back and seeing some of the things that have been done, and I've read a lot about it, and we keep repeating the same thing over and over again. And of course, we expect a different result, and you know what that's the definition of. So if you do it again for doulas to do what midwives did or what doctors did, and think that they're going to have freedom, is a mistake to do that. So don't do it. Don't let them corral you. Stay wild. You're not going to maybe you won't make as much money, right? Maybe it'll be harder for you to get clients because clients are going to want people who are paid for by insurance, or or they're going to buy the commercials that come out there that tell you that you need to be only licensed doulas are the kind of doulas that you want in your family, and then they'll have testimonials by fake actors who pretend to be people saying,
Right.
I had my licensed doula and she was great. Yeah, you had a licensed doula? I didn't have a licensed doula. Okay.
Jeez.
I had unlicensed doula and my birth was a disaster, or my,
Right.
that kind of thing. And you'll see it on TV all the time. I mean, there's an ad going around right now, to really be off track, about mail-in voting. I'm against where you can't identify who the voter is. I don't like that. That's my position. Some of your listeners will agree, some of your listeners will disagree. But there's a commercial put out that shows a woman who is a surgeon and a farmer and a flight attendant, and they say, I can't be promised to be there on vote on election day, so I need mail-in voting. I need mail-in voting. And then the last guy's a guy driving a truck, and he says, we need more mail-in voting. And who sponsors the commercial? United States Post Office.
Interesting.
Think about it for a second.
Yeah.
Who makes money with mail-in voting? Post office.
The post office.
So they put a commercial out there making look mail-in voting is such a necessity. How did we do elections up until like 15 years ago? Everybody voted on election day, except for the few people in the military who were out of the country who wrote in and gave a reason to have a mail-in ballot. So It's the same thing. You'll start to see commercials about, whatever product it is, and they'll tell you how great it is. But if you ever watched a pharmaceutical commercial, half the commercial is a guy talking really fast about having bloody diarrhea and brain tumors. Okay. And yet, yes, you can, if you still take this medication, you can go out and play tennis with your granddaughter again. So take the medication. That's the whole plot of a commercial on pharma. This is all propaganda, and yet it works. Clearly it works, so they wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Well, I have a question that's kind of like, I'm not sure, I mean, because you're definitely involved in the birthing, but when you were going to medical school, how much did they teach or go into the death process or the dealing with the death and dying? Or
you're talking the late 70s for me, and for medical school, we didn't talk about it at all. I mean, the most respect we had for death was because we got to operate on cadavers. And so we had reverence for the people that we were operating on them. I mean, we tried to treat them with dignity, and we gave them names and that sort of thing. But we had no training, and we had no training in nutrition, breastfeeding. We had no training in death and dying. Our training is pharmaceutical based, because Amy, who pays for medical schools? Pharmaceutical companies. They pay for the medical. That's been ever since the Flexner Report and the Rockefellers in the early 20s. They took over the medical schools, and medical schools are highly dependent on pharmaceutical funding. So they're going to teach a pharmaceutical-based thing. The answer to any problem is a prescription. That's how we're taught. Not healthy living, not naturopathy, not homeopathy, not alternative therapies. We're taught to treat disease, not prevent disease. Now, what they're teaching in medical schools now, I don't know, but by the type of doctor, the young doctors that are coming out, they don't know much anyway. So I don't think that that's changed much. I think that it's still very, very, they think they know a lot. They come out very cocky. And they, listen, going to medical school and getting through residency is a challenge. And I honor those people that did that, but you're not the brightest bulb in the chandelier. So shut up. Because there's a lot of people that know a lot of stuff, and just because they don't have degrees behind their name does not make them unqualified to speak about it. Pulling the "I've got more degrees than you have" thing just shows you that your ego is quite fragile, and that you are you're not confident. No, you're insecure, and so they compensate it by acting all assured. Right? A good practitioner is very easily willing to admit they don't know something. If you're a doula and a midwife, and somebody asks you a question and you don't know the answer to it, somebody who's confident will say, "No, I don't know that. Let's look it up."
Yeah, let's go look it up.
Somebody who's not confident, has a big ego, is going to come up with some bullshit response, like, "Nobody does breech delivery." Only crazy people do breech delivery. That's the response. That's the response from the intelligent, highly educated, alphabet soup degrees that people have when asked about why they don't do breech delivery. Oh, breech is dangerous. Well, but actually, doctor, it isn't. It really isn't dangerous. It's actually dangerous it's more dangerous made by the fact that you're unskilled than the fact that a woman's having a breech baby. So when bringing this back again to doulas, keep your freedom, stay independent, stay small, stay under the radar if you have to. All right. And if you are somebody who's highly motivated and wants to get into it, the legislative issue, run for office.
There you go.
Okay.
I like that.
Start a lobbying organization or firm. I think at the beginning we talked a little bit about this data center in Utah and Kevin O'Leary and this whole big thing going on. There's a lot. I mean, now my feed on Instagram is filled with these people. I don't even know how. I guess because I live in Utah, they started shoving this stuff in my face. But most of these people are just local citizens who just have found a cause that they found worthy, that's motivated them to, sacrifice their free time to be part of this movement, to whether good or bad, whether you're for the data center or against it. But you've got to admire the motivation that they've come to. They got a passion for it. So the same thing is going to happen if you I have a passion, but at my point in my life, I don't have the energy to go to Washington, all the time and sit there and sit in committees where nothing is done and it's tabled till next month, that sort of thing. I'm not that kind of person, but there are people who can do that, and they should. And if you find a calling, and there's enough of us out there that there will be a small percentage of us who will come out and say, I don't like what they're doing to doulas, and I'm going to fight for that. And they're going to have a crowdfunding, and they're going to hire attorneys, because you got to have attorneys, and you're going to have to find that lobbyist facilitator that I talked about, and you're going to then learn a whole new education about how Washington works, like I did the one time that it's run by 24-year-old interns.
Well, it sounds a lot like a lot of, honestly, because I mean, my husband and I work in television, my whole family, and it's the same thing with pitching shows to the network. You're not pitching to you're pitching to, their assistant that's looking at their watches, and you can tell by their body language because they're the ones that are going to pitch it up. It's the same. I mean, that's the formula. You send out
and that's the problem when things get big. When all politics was local, you knew the people on your school board, you knew the people on your city council. All right. As cities got bigger, there's a complete disconnect. There just is, and so bigger isn't better. And if one theme has come through this whole talk we've had, it's about staying independent. Keep your independence. Don't sacrifice your independence.
Well, you were also saying if you have a calling. And I feel that if you have a calling to be a doula, whether it's a birth doula or a death doula, it's a calling. And like you said, if you have a calling to go to DC or to follow through on this, it's a whole different kind of a calling, but it's still a calling. And you can maybe switch over to that. But I mean, that's the thing, is that it's like, how do you regulate somebody has a nurturing and an instinct and that wants to do this? It's just, so that's why you have to keep the freedom. Like you said, we have to keep it kind of free.
Yeah, it's funny. When I first heard that they wanted to regulate doulas, I kind of mocked it by saying, geez, how do you regulate nurturing?
Yeah. Like you just
said. It's like, oh, there's only one way to nurture, and this is the way you're going to nurture. Okay. But I can guarantee you there are people out there already coming up with ideas of how to nurture and wanting to make it the standard of care.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And holding hands with a stranger is forbidden. That kind of thing. The poor that Nathan did. He touched a dying person, and for that, he found that residency was incompatible with his nature. And so I don't know whether he left or they made him leave, but whatever else, he just left. And he was being beautiful and sweet to this older person dying alone. Yeah. And human and dying alone.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
kids.
I'll tell you, when you're alone and you don't have any family or you don't have anybody that loves you or cares about you, the idea that someone's going to come and sit in a chair next to you and talk to you and maybe hold your hand and ask you how you're feeling and what your thoughts are and tell me about your childhood, and that somebody's actually interested in you, can't tell you that is better medicine than anything you can stick in an IV. And yet it's they can't regulate it and they can't charge for it. So I suppose it's not okay. This is how they think, and it's led us to a place where we don't birth healthily and we don't die healthily. That's a word.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to, guys, this is amazing, and we could talk all day about all kinds of things, but we are getting long in the tooth. I do want to wrap it up by speaking to, I love the independence and the rah, 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 but also, Stu, you touched on something that is a place that I am deeply affected by, and that is the psychology behind birth and labor and conception even, and how it affects us transgenerationally. And yes, I do believe, and that's a topic for another episode, that is why we are where we are at as a society in the world. And I'm sure 100% that it has affected the way we have, been led in the death and dying world. And that's why people are trying to kind of combat that and find humanism again, because we just got lost. So I think the key here, like you're saying, is like, how can we reclaim that humanism? How can we change all these things? And it is to remain independent. And I think, like you said, that's the theme of.
Yeah, and I'm not an expert in the psychology part, but we did have a guest on our podcast, Bliss and I, Mary Jackson. She's a longtime midwife.
Yes, I met her.
Yeah, up in the Ojai area of California. And she was representing the APPPAH, which I don't know what it stands for totally, but it's about pre and perinatal psychology.
Yeah.
It's not a topic I know well, but it's fascinating to me that what our mother's experiencing at our conception and while we're in the womb does affect us. And when we are growing up in a world that is, it's never been a better world to live in, actually. Put the media aside that's trying to freak you out at every turn. We've got the world's education and the world's knowledge in our pocket. We have abundance of food, at least in the countries that we're talking about. It's a great time to be living, yet it seems like everybody's under stress. And you can't quantify the effect that has. But pre and perinatal psychology is something that if your listeners wanted to listen to, they could go find that episode with Mary Jackson and at least give them a taste of it. And then they could look more into it and find the value of what we're doing for birth. And then it obviously applies all the way through your life into death and into dying.
I was on their chair. I was on their board for a year. That was one of the main organizations.
APPPAH, you were?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm a big supporter of the psychology behind all that. That's my juice of life. It's not necessarily just being in the room helping someone birth or die or in postpartum, but I really want to get people talking about and understanding and deep diving into how to get here. Why am I here? How am I going to make changes going forward?
And trying to eliminate fear as the motivating factor, because it is what's used to manipulate us all. And if we can live a less fearful life, we're going to lead a better life.
Hurrah.
By the way, we could just end this with one question. Are all of you reading books?
Yes.
Okay. So let's all tell the audience what book we're reading right now. I'll start.
Okay.
I'm reading Project Hail Mary.
Oh, okay.
They made the movie. I went and saw the movie, and sometimes when I see a movie that I really like, I want to read the book. So I bought the book and I'm reading the book. I've got about I'm about 3/4 of the way through the book.
My son loved that book. My son loved that book. How do you like it? I haven't read it yet.
I like it. I like it. Well, that's not good English. I was going to say I like it a lot. No, I like it. I think that some of the writing isn't very. It seems a little bit. I don't want to say juvenile, but it just seems a little. Maybe it's written for that audience. Maybe it's written for teenagers. Maybe it's written for that because it seems a little. The science is incredible. The science in the book is incredible, but the dialogue is a little bit stiff. Of course, what do you do when you're talking to an alien? So I don't know, but I'm enjoying it, and I can't. And now it's starting to swell toward the end of the movie, and so I'm getting to the end of the book, and I can't put it down. I have to put it down to come and talk to Babs, but
Yeah.
later today I'm going to get back to it. So what are you guys reading? You have to pick one book. You can't say I've got 3 books I'm reading. No. Pick one.
Well, I am reading 3 books.
I am also.
And don't you just love it when you get to the part of the book where you can't put it down? That's like the best.
Yeah.
When you can't put it
The
down.
last 50, 100 pages of a book, you just want to read it to the end. You don't want to stop. So no, what's the most recent book that you read? Last time you read a book.
I'm not the most recent book. I'm not going to talk about that though, because the most recent book that I just finished was The Nightingale, which everybody recommended and everything. And it's like, it was very good. But the book before that was called Cloud Cuckoo Land, which it's honestly made me cry. So when I have a book that makes me cry, that's a big deal. So I'm going to say Cloud Cuckoo Land over the other ones because it's written by the same guy that wrote All the Light You Cannot See, which the same thing I had a hard time getting into it. I'm like, oh, I got to push through to get, and then once I got into it, I was like, oh my God. And then it's like both books were kind of like fever dreams.
That's fun.
Cool.
Cloud Cuckoo Land. I can't read it. I think it's backwards.
Simone de Beauvoir.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
of course you're reading. Oh yeah. Of course. That's
what's the subtitle?
A Very Easy Death. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But my daughter gave this to me because she's also a super cool lady and she found it somewhere. We read a lot. I love those little book libraries that are in neighborhoods, or like leave a book, take a book. Because you end up kind of going, well, like, I don't know if I would have picked this out normally, but I'm going to give it a shot. Sometimes you put it back.
Yeah. There's one in my neighborhood that's like super religious, and then there's another one in my neighborhood that has like the old New Yorkers in it. And I'm like, New Yorkers. So yeah. Do you have any in your neighborhood? Any of those little libraries?
In Kanab? No, I don't. Not that I know of.
Have you ever seen one? Have you ever stopped at one?
Oh, I mean, you're talking about little libraries or bookstores?
The little ones that they put out in front of their house. And it's just like a little,
No, I mean, I don't go to garage sales very much, and I don't walk around and go to people's like front yards very often. So
I do.
All right, but I got to go, guys.
Yeah, we got to go. Yes. I'm spitting.
So happy editing. Thanks for having me on, and
thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity. And if people want to reach out to me, they can find everything about me at my website, birthinginstincts.com. And on Instagram, it's Birthing Instincts, that sort of thing. So feel free to explore your options. Don't follow the herd.
Don't follow the herd.
We appreciate
Love
all
you,
your
bye.
time. Thank you. We'll see you in Kanab.
Come visit.